Well, I mean, you're a political analyst. What happened with Dennis Kucinich today in Ohio? I mean, because we were looking at it, we couldn't believe we were talking about some of the candidates that we like and we're rooting for, but the one we had some of the most highest hopes for was Dennis Kucinich, and at last we looked, it was about 65% of the polls reporting, and he was down almost 300,000 to 100,000 in the votes, and I just can't put my finger on it. Can you help us out there?
As far as I know, and I haven't followed his campaign that closely, but as far as I know, he came into his campaign pretty late, or into the race pretty late compared to the other candidates. So that might play a big role. As for precincts reporting, when it says 65% of precincts reporting, that does not mean 65% of the vote is in. I'm not trying to give you false hope, but that means that 65% of polling places reported something. So
Gotcha.
technically that could be one vote. You know,
Yeah.
they turned in one vote. So they might turn them in batches. So going forward, we might actually see that vote change. But at the current time, you know, that's what that actually means. So there still is hope. Swearingen, that was the race that I was watching closer. And from the last time I checked, it said 80% in, and she was like 1/3 to 2/3. So it wasn't looking good. So I don't think we're going to pull that one off. At the end of the day, money will make a difference in advertising and whatnot. But if you can print stuff and put it in people's hands and get door to door, and actually get people fired up, that's what's going to make the difference. So I think that's where a lot of the races this year have suffered. And we will learn in 2018, you know, what we can do better and maybe what we need to change. One of the ideas I have is to build an organization that has nothing to do with financing, that every member gets a vote, and we decide at the beginning, like literally like 2018 general election day, the next day, everyone gets together and decides, okay, which races are we going to run in, and who do we want to run in those races? So before candidates even announce or anything like that, like a conglomerate of progressive groups will basically decide ahead of time. Now, the feasibility of this happening and organizing all this is pretty slim because, you know, the progressive movement is very split. But what I want to see happen is to not have the races divided between progressives like mine is. Everyone knows I was first in the race. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is we need to have other races for other people to get into. So if they want to run for office, great. We'll plug them in where they're best. So if we come around, you know, to Kamala Harris or whoever gets in Dianne Feinstein's seat, if it's not a progressive, to the next election, I might not be the person to run for that U.S. Senate seat if we find somebody better. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to find good candidates for every single seat and only run one candidate for every single seat. And I think this election and District 34 special election has taught us that. And hopefully we get that lesson not to join races that there's already progressives in, because we're not going to win that way. I mean, we're already at a disadvantage when it comes to being progressive versus a corporate Democrat. And then we also have a Republican voting bloc in the state, too, that's most likely not going to vote for either. So we need to develop a plan as a progressive movement. I want to see us do that statewide in California at least, because we're so close to taking over California when it's on paper at least, but then we're so fragmented in our movement and there's so much drama in the progressive movement that it just makes it like, you know all about that, you Russian spies.
Hey, we'll have the green screen on Moscow behind us. With that being said, Dave,
so you know about that, but like I've gotten attacked from all angles, and it's actually really, really interesting who I get attacked by. So I have the typical MAGA trolls that come at me on Twitter and just call me socialist and all this stuff and communist and whatnot. And I'm like, socialist? Well, yeah. What's the secret there? It's in my bio of my Twitter account. But people
we're establishment shills. That's what we are.
An establishment.
We're an establishment shills for supporting.
Bernie. Yeah. Well, you got big corporate funding for those fancy curtains in the background there.
You better believe it. There's a lot of money. Putin paid for all this right here.
You can afford two as well and cover up the whole back.